I have the great honor of having distinguished guests from as far as Japan and South Korea and as close as, I guess, Austria.
Kind of.
If one can think about. And Nino here was talking about how he hadn't had snow all year long in Austria, so he was happy to be here in Georgetown with 10 inches of snow.
Yeah.
I told him that sledding's at my house. Anybody who gets bored this afternoon, we've got a big, almost a slalom trail in my backyard. I'm going to give a few opening remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over in the order as my guests appear. Nino's going to talk about what are some of the cyber developments from the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Mr. Kang's going to talk about the initiatives that are underway in South Korea. Yoko is going to talk about the initiatives that are underway in Japan. James is going to talk about the initiatives in the UK, and then Mihaly is going to talk about Hungary. But I'd like to give sort of a context. Our panel is National Cyber Strategies, Are We Making Progress? And we heard from Senator Whitehouse this morning that our laws are not up to date. We heard from Michael about, at least part that I could hear, was that we haven't really considered the economics of it. You know, and over the last 50 years, and in particular the last 25, information communications technologies has really transformed our businesses, our way of life, our critical infrastructures. Today, our countries are provisioning near ubiquitous communications to every last mile. If you think about the broadband initiatives that we have underway here in the United States or elsewhere around the world, to allow everybody to have high-speed click, connect, and search any information from any device, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anywhere in the world. And that has enabled our societies to become more digital and our people to become more digital natives. Initiatives like e-banking, e-government, e-commerce, the next generation smart grids, air traffic control, we have actually put information communications technology embedded the ICT and the internet into every citizen essential service. So it's no wonder now that our countries are talking about the need for securing it and the need for cyber strategies, because we have, in fact, an infrastructure internet entanglement that there's really no turning back. But one of the things, are we making progress? Certainly we're talking about the threats. We read about them every day. Many of us are developing strategies. There's more than 50 countries that have cybersecurity strategies. And the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, the NATO, and the EU are all pushing countries to develop their cybersecurity strategies. But how many of those cybersecurity strategies have an economic lens to them? We need to protect our critical infrastructure. We need to protect ourselves from fraud, from intellectual property theft, from espionage, from physical destruction. But how many are putting them in economic terms? There are 3 countries I'm going to highlight that have started to use an economic lens, at least in the way that they're measuring the losses to their GDP. So first, we measure GDP growth for the ICT enablement. For every 10% of our population that gets connected to that high-speed internet highway, it's going to lead to at least 1% GDP growth. For the G20 countries, we're expecting a minimum of 4% GDP growth for that ICT infrastructure modernization and our citizen connectivity. For countries that are maturing and developing, they're going to see as much as 10% GDP growth. But many countries are not measuring the GDP losses. There's one country recently, the Netherlands, took a methodology to develop and did it 6 different ways of measuring how much they were losing to intellectual property theft, identity fraud, and just plain old crime. And do you know how much that was? It was close to 2% of their GDP, the same equivalent to what they grew in 2010. The United States had a study that was just led by a number of former government officials and key industry leaders that talked about the theft of intellectual property in the United States. And they measured the fact that we were losing at minimum $300 billion a year in intellectual property theft, just intellectual property theft. That's close to 1% of our GDP. Germany has done another study very similar and was led by their leading industry association, and it said that they were losing a minimum of 1.5% of their GDP to intellectual property theft and fraud. So if you think about 3 of the G20 countries are losing anywhere from 1 to 2% of their GDP, $300 billion, 10 million euros, and so on. 10 billion euros and so on. How do we start to think about and how that adds up? And can you imagine what an economic stimulus package that might be if we were to actually take and save even 10% of that money and repurpose it into our critical infrastructures? So as we start to look at and hear about the cybersecurity strategies that are enabling and around the world, I think we need to start to characterize them and start to evaluate them on whether or not they are contributing to GDP growth and how much of their initiatives are actually limiting the GDP degradation. And with that, as sort of a backdrop, I'm going to turn it over to Nino to give us a perspective from the OSCE and maybe to some degree from his perspective in Europe. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. It is a great pleasure to be here today, surrounded by so much. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now? Better? Okay. All right, then. Well, once more, it's great to be here, surrounded by so much expertise and so many friendly faces. And yes, I am excited about the snow. To correct, Austria has seen quite a bit of snow, but where I live in Vienna, we haven't had snow for years. My daughter is 3 years old. She has yet to build a snowman in Vienna, so it's just one of those things. It's great to have some snow. Before I begin, a small disclaimer. My fellow panelists here will likely touch upon a number of issues from national perspectives. This is something I cannot do since I'm representing the secretariat of an organization that comprises 57 member, or in our case, participating states. What this means is that in addition to my boss, I effectively have 57 additional bosses, so I think you will understand that I will not be critiquing individual countries or taking sides. I am, however, a big fan of answering direct questions directly, so I do want to tackle immediately the overarching question of our panel, i.e. national cyber strategies, are we making progress? And it is my assessment, my personal assessment, that yes, we are making progress. I know that we're here in one of the finest universities in the world, and those who know me know that I have a very soft spot for academia, so I am well aware that we could now spend the rest of the day debating what progress actually means. Allow me, therefore, to explain what I mean by it. If we look back at the state of play only a couple of years ago, much fewer states had cyber ICT security strategies in place. And what's worse, a large number of these states did not really believe in the importance of having such a strategy in the first place. I still remember conversations that I've had with representatives where they told me, you know, Nino, your cyber science fiction stuff, that's all well and good, but we've got crime to worry about. We've got border issues to worry about. Again, it is not for me to publicly criticize any state and the priorities it sets. I just want to illustrate the state of affairs not so long ago in terms of awareness and willingness to enhance national and international cyber ICT security. Now, much has changed over the past few years, and the fact that more and more states are either have cyber ICT security strategies in place or are developing them or are at least looking into developing them is an illustration thereof. Now, I am acutely aware that large differences still exist in terms of the scope and ambition of many such strategies, but again, that is to be expected given the different circumstances that countries find themselves in today. Now, speaking of this, what makes a good cyber ICT security strategy? And obviously, there's a lot of elements that would go into answering this question, and much has been written about it by very capable people, including, of course, by you, Melissa. To me, however, the key, I want to keep it simple. The key question that I would ask a state is this: now that you have developed and implemented a strategy, is your state in a better position than it was before? If the answer is yes, then frankly, I believe things are moving in the right direction. To an outside observer, I understand that this may not appear like all that much. However, I know from personal experience that states have at times allowed perfect to be the enemy of good enough, resulting in redrafts and delays of perfectly adequate documents. And in a thematic area as dynamic as cyber ICT security, this can be a concern. Let me also elaborate a little bit more on what I think the right direction is, and I want to do so based on discussions that have taken place at the OSCE, aimed at developing an initial set of cyber ICT security-related confidence-building measures. Now, all strategies have to always serve a number of purposes. They usually also have to communicate to a number of different audiences, both inside and outside the country in question. What I want to focus on is on those parts of our cyber ICT security strategy which are unclassified, shared with others, and which therefore help build transparency, because enhancing cyber ICT security-related transparency has effectively been the focus of OSCE efforts in the thematic area for the past 2 years. Now, as some of you will know, the OSCE participating states recently adopted Permanent Council Decision 1106 on the initial OSCE set of confidence-building measures to reduce the risks of conflict stemming from the use of information and communication technologies. Adoption of these CBMs is a breakthrough moment, and it is an achievement that all participating states can and should be very proud of. Chaired by the United States of America, negotiations on this initial set of CBMs began in 2012 and successfully concluded on December 3rd, 2013, and a number of key people that led these discussions will be speaking at this conference later today with Michel Marco, for example. Now, as CBMs are not the focus of our panel, I will not go into details, but I want to stress that overall this initial set of CBMs focuses on a set of transparency measures which will allow for exchanges of information and communication on several levels. And one of the key pieces of information that the participating states want to communicate to each other are their respective cyber ICT security strategies. With this in mind, just over a week ago, Spain officially shared its cyber ICT security strategy with the other participating states, and several other states have already indicated their willingness to do so later this year. Now, to me, this is a very positive development, not least because I do consider this outreach character of every national and international strategy as one of its crucial components. As more and more states develop and implement such strategies, as they communicate to internal and external audiences, they are all contributing to enhancing both national and international cyber ICT security. Because the more strategies are out there and the more states engage in active discussion of them, the OSCE being one forum where such discussion is expected to take place, the better the quality of future such strategies is likely going to be. I want to close with this. Based on everything I have said, I think it is accurate to say that in terms of cyber ICT security strategies, states are indeed making progress. My gut feeling, however, is that the real question that we should probably be looking at is not whether we are making progress per se, and I think this goes into how Melissa is also approaching it, is not whether we are making progress per se, but rather whether we are making enough progress fast enough. And I'd love to hear other people's views on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nino. So one of the things that I've recently worked on was a cyber readiness index, and it evaluates the maturity of countries in developing a strategy and getting operational capabilities and following particular legal aspects and funding cyber initiatives and then measuring it in economic terms. And I use that as part of the backdrop for the next four speakers. Is there a national strategy underway in their country, and who has been identified as the lead within their country? Is there an action plan? Is it funded? Is there research and development? Are the laws current or need to be updated? And how are they thinking about the threat? And then how are they measuring the progress against those particular initiatives? Those are just some of the key questions that I gave them as sort of a backdrop. And at this point, I'd like to ask AV to bring up the first set of slides for Mr. Kang. And he's going to talk about things from South Korea's perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sung Kang from Korea. I'm going to introduce what's going on in South Korea regarding cybersecurity policy. This morning, I heard from Senator the White House and Mr. Daniel regarding cybersecurity threats policy in American perspective and actually global perspective. In Korea also, we have developing many cyber threats policies against the cyber threats from many other countries, many other entities. Just I want to share some ideas, and in the end, I'm going to share some kind of lessons or themes to be included into global or international norms when we think of. First one, currently, Korea, we have developed many measures to check whether actually cybersecurity is secure in this country, but actually many threats are still ongoing. Right now, actually, database almost 10,000 or 1,000 to 2,000 attacks from other countries are kind of coming on in this country. And globally, average of 240,000 cyber attacks every day actually is happening. And actually, loss damage is sizes almost 1.4% GDP actually size regarding the McAfee statistics. In Korea, the average of the US dollar 3.6 billion of damage is happening every year, which is twice of the natural disaster damage. And actually, there are many, many reasons to happen this event. And recently, in January, in Korea, there was a kind of huge personal information leakage was happened in actual January 8th. Personal information of about 100 million customers from 3 major card companies, Nongyeo Bank and Gukmin and Lotte, was leaked by the subcontractor. And actually right now, the government-wide TF is organized and many issues under discussion, including legal system, lack of internal professionals, and excessive dependency on residence registration number, which is very similar to national identification number in many other countries. And actually, next stage, we need to conduct information security policy along with the personal information protection policy. And actually, we need to establish a comprehensive personal information protection policy, which are actually allocated to the government-wide task force. I am the member of the TF. And based on those previous incidents and experience, we identified actually 4 points of cybersecurity. First one, awareness, and that's business area, expert, human resource area, and last, national response system. I'm gonna actually give some more details about this. First one, public awareness. Right now in Korea, many people kind of, do not follow some kind of, guideline or the law, or individual level, business level, government as well. For instance, government perspective. Total amount of the budget for cybersecurity is 3.7% among with ICT expenditure, but which is very, very actually low compared to other OECD member countries. Usually 8 or 9, sometimes 10% of the ICT expenditure is going to cybersecurity area. In business area also, the government actually made some guidelines actually, which is to spend around 5% of ICT expenditure go to cybersecurity area, but right now average expenditure rate is around 3%, which is a little bit kind of low. That's why these kind of the cybersecurity incidents are happening many times. We made some kind of suggestions to recommend more entities with information security management systems. We called ISMS need to be adapted to their business. And second kind of suggestion is to encourage more people to comply with the security guideline. For instance, the CISO, this is kind of assurance system for the private, the business people. We kind of recommended to hire those kind of cyber experts for securing their business security. And sometimes periodical assessment on security vulnerability is very necessary to protect their business assets. Those are some kind of public awareness initiative. And the second initiative is business area. Cybersecurity is very close to business, right? There are many kind of very competitive companies in global perspective, Kaspersky, Intel, MS, there are many companies. In Korea, actually, in general, the competitiveness rate is a little bit low. So we need to build some kind of the healthy ecosystem for the world best class production and services. Last year, we picked around 10 technologies, including encryption, recognition, the monitoring, and vulnerability test. So we're going to spend some amount of R&D money to develop those technologies. And we're going to nurture global companies specializing in security software area. Every year, almost 3 or more companies we're going to select, and we're going to kind of support to develop more competitive the softwares. And test beds, we're going to build a new test bed for cybersecurity area from 8 test beds to 16 test beds until 2017. Those are some kind of ideas to support the business area. The third sector we recognize to cause or to make this cyber the happenings is human resource area. We need more the people, expert people, to protect or to deal with these policy issues. First, we want to foster cyber experts and training programs. By using these new programs, we're gonna kind of train around 5,000 experts, very highly skilled experts until 2017. We're gonna develop programs to train practitioners and follow-up management people, and more schools with the information security departments and expanded the cybersecurity courses. For instance, undergraduate level, we're going to select around 33 universities to make programs to teach undergraduate students. And the graduate level, we're going to choose around 30 schools to provide more programs regarding cybersecurity area. And we're going to actually hire new cyber experts in the defense sector as well, and actually explore new areas of knowledge incentive business. So we're going to kind of create new jobs. And fourth sector of the cybersecurity policy in Korea is response system. Previously, many speakers said actually information sharing is very critical to deal with the cybersecurity policy. We have developed some kind of preemptive defense system last year. We spent around $4 million to develop this system, and we're going to operating this year. And another national cyber threat information sharing system also has been developed. We're going to share those kind of cyber threat information with other areas, including defense, intelligence, and as well as the private sectors. And there are several other kind of schemes as well. So we're going to we're going to provide some kind of the more information and telecommunication infrastructure or protection system, CIIP. Right now in Korea, we recognize 209 actually systems, including banking, the water, electricity, etc. Actually, but actually we're going to increase these numbers to 409 systems this year. Regarding the prevention system, we're going to develop actually the banking side, financial management commission. They are right now developing electronic financial fraud response system. Maybe actually they're going to open this system this year. And there are many other response systems as well. This is going to be some examples to deal with the security policy in Korea. And last, this one, many countries also, including US and some other countries, maybe have similar kind of experiences. Just I picked 3 points: governance issues. Many authorities, including police, defense, and many other private sectors, as well as too many authorities, but some kind of very complicated coordination system. Still in Korea, presidential office, they are coordinating all of these activities, but sometimes it is not easy to effectively coordinating. These are very deep, big issues among countries. Another issue is top-down or the bottom-up approach. Previously, regarding internet governance issue, multi-stakeholder approach is, to me, very kind of appropriate, but it's not easy to, kind of the follow-up. Basically, the market mechanism is useful to deal with the cybersecurity issues, but the government intervention or the PPP, public-private partnership, also required to deal with these issues. And the last one is global collaboration, information sharing, especially the malicious traffic. It's kind of since the beginning of the internet, the CERT and those kind of security groups are organized and they are sharing those kind of malicious traffic. But still, actually, these activities need to be encouraged. Those are some kind of ideas to be integrated into the international norms when we think of. And Right now in Korea, actually, we want to provide some kind of volunteer-based or the market-based approach to deal with this the cybersecurity issues. All business people, they voluntarily accept some kind of the assessment system to check whether their business is secure regarding cyber perspective or not. So they're gonna have some kind of rate, and they're gonna kind of make the announce regarding our business is safe or not. Those kind of activities are ongoing, and actually I'm thankful for Melissa and Georgetown University, and actually I'm happy to give this explanation. I'm gonna show our experience with other countries and all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Certainly, South Korea has had a lot of challenges the last year. Certainly, the distributed denial of service against the Shanghun Bank, and then the fraud and IP theft that you just discussed. Our next speaker, Yoko, is going to talk to us about what's going on in Japan. They recently released their cyber strategy this past summer, fall, and she's going to talk about the initiatives underway in Japan.
So, hello, everyone. My name is Yoko Nita from Japan Science and Technology Agency, and I'm working on cyber security policy and also the cyber warfare and information kind of thing. And today, I'd like to inform you in advance that my speech is not reflected of JST at all. This is my, my own idea, my personal views. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the background of the Japan cybersecurity strategy. So in 2000, maybe you all know, Japanese ministries and governments, home pages got attacked suddenly and modified. And at that time, the National Information Security Center, which is called NISC, was launched the first time. And but at that time, they did not. NISC did not work on cyber as sort of national security. They work on more in terms of the crisis management. But in 2009, that United States and Korea got attacked, did us in 2009, and then Japan regarded as okay, cyber should be national security. So anyway, I'm happy to tell you that Japan also regards cyberspace as the fifth battleground after land, sea, air, and space, as many countries do. And last year, in early summer, the Information Security Policy Council adopted the cybersecurity strategy. The Japanese government used to employ the wording information security for its policy and basic plans, since there is an increasing number of cyber threats which are beyond information security, such as sabotage against critical infrastructure. So Tokyo decided to use cybersecurity in order to address all of these issues for the first time. So this cybersecurity strategy, this is a new one, and of course I analyzed and observed in depth, and this new strategy has high aims, high expectations, and we are working on it to how to implement them. So this is not perfect, but it covers broadly. So I would argue in some ways, but I'm not going to criticize because we are working on it. Okay. So this strategy aims to develop world-leading, resilient, and dynamic cyberspace and make Japan a global leader for cybersecurity. Well, I have to argue first, well, we are not world-leading for this cybersecurity strategy as yet. We are a little bit behind, and we are following. We are sort of follower still, and it is not resilient because so many Japanese industries has got attacked, and their business, their heart of business, source of their business has been exploited already, and they haven't know how much their information has been stolen. So it's not resilient as yet. It's still vulnerable, and also it's not dynamic as yet. Actually, it's a little bit declining, I have to say, because in Japan, IT industries, they are not sort of suffering, making not profit much, and there are many, layoffs and other things are going on now. But I hope that they'll come back. Okay, let me go on, and okay, but I would like to highlight the epoch sort of making in this strategy. Well, Japan will consider, it doesn't mean Japan will do now, but Japan will consider redesigning the role of Ministry of Defense and self-defense force for protecting the Japanese citizens from cyber attack. Well, conventionally, North-Japan, MOD and SDF can go into action unless they get attacked, but cannot turn out for other ministries, for industries, and counter an attack. There were lots of discussion and debating, but the conclusion is security is for the Japanese citizens. So for us, this marks a milestone and a game change, and it's appropriate and a critical approach, changing over the course of Japanese conventional security strategy. Of course, there are lots of challenges, and I like to answer the questions that Melissa have provided in advance, and I'm going to highlight them later. Okay, and then. Okay, I'm going to touch upon the role of the NISC, who is a control power center, control tower for this cybersecurity strategy. First of all, Japanese government needs to strengthen the legal authority of the National Information Security Center, which is NISC, under the Cabinet Secretariat as a national command center for cybersecurity, as declared in a cybersecurity strategy released last year. Although the NISC is responsible for crafting cybersecurity policy and strategy and sharing information with domestic and international partners, it currently, unfortunately, lacks the authority to serve as a center for issuing alerts and analysis of cyber threats. The police agency, the Ministry of Economy, Trade Industry, Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, and National Police Agency have channels to exchange information with the private sector and international counterparts. So it is essential to make clear that NISC has a leading role in providing information and clarify who exactly will receive that information. Otherwise, information sharing efforts could overlap and create confusion in the crisis. So we are working on this information sharing, which is most critical part for the cyber issue. Okay, so Japan will host Meridian Conference this autumn, and we'll hold Tokyo Olympics in 2020. I mean, it's in 6 years. We have under 6 years to work on more on cybersecurity. So we need to be aware that cyber is not just an internet thing. It is the most lethal weapon in the 21st century. It's a memory stick, from my point of view, reflecting all those Stuxnet thing. So as I mentioned at first, Japan's approach towards cybersecurity is not enough and a little bit behind because of our sense of security in a homogeneous society, and it's less good at integration fusion, representing the benefits for ministries but not for nation. But now we try to address these traditional, conventional thinking. So we're working on how to change the mindset among Japanese governments, industries, and also the Japanese citizens as well. So I'm happy to answer the questions I have been provided later. So thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. The strategy is published in English. Translation is available, which was great. And for those of you studying that, it's a great document. Our next speaker, James Quinault, is the director of the National Cybersecurity Program at the Cabinet Office of the United Kingdom, and he has the opportunity to refresh the UK's cyber strategy. And I look forward to hearing your comments, James.
Thank you, Melissa. As she said, I'm James Quinault. I'm a UK government official, and I'm the director of the Office of Cybersecurity in the UK. Our office helps ministers in our government set strategy on cyber and marshals and coordinates all our government departments and agencies behind that strategy. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to address you. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to address you sitting down. I had one of your enormous American breakfasts this morning, and that podium looks quite a long way away. The government I work for overhauled a national security strategy in the UK on coming into office in 2010, and at that time it set the risk from cyber as a tier 1 threat to the United Kingdom, up there with the risk of a major military conflagration or international terrorism. And at a time when it was cutting most other forms of defence and security spending, it decided to find new money for this area, £650 million of new money. My office has the spending of that, which we do with government departments and agencies, other partners, whoever and whatever we think will make the biggest dent in the problem. We published our cybersecurity strategy back in 2011, and that remains the plan that we're working to, although we've published a couple of updates since. Our strategy sounds very similar to what you've heard about Korea or Japan, but I like to think it has a bit of a British flavour, and I'll try and give you a sense of that now. It's very broad-ranging. It covers everything from cyber fraud and crime up through hacktivism, industrial espionage, right up to dealing with the risk of a destructive attack on our critical national infrastructure. It may be that in the future we decide to deal with these different phenomena in different ways, but for now it feels natural to be coping with them under one strategy. We absolutely do look at this stuff through an economic lens. The strapline of the strategy is about making the UK one of the safest places in the world to do business in cyberspace. My government is very, very interested in seizing opportunity from this as well as tackling the risks. It believes that if we can get good at this in the UK, then economic opportunity will flow from that, both in the direct sense of flogging cybersecurity products and services to foreigners, but also in the indirect sense that it makes the UK a better place to bring IP-rich business, to headquarters your business or whatever. The strategy is very kind of liberal market based in approach. My government believes that regulation is a blunt instrument at the best of times, and this is not the best of times. This is too fast moving, it is too complicated for regulation to be the obvious answer. Regulation puts people like me in charge. That's not a very good thing when you're talking about the IT industry. If I could correctly predict what developments were coming down the track in IT, I probably wouldn't be working for the government. Perhaps I'd be funding this conference from my vast personal fortune. We're interested instead in market mechanisms, things that get consumers and businesses to demand better security in the products and services they consume, and which make it commercial for firms to supply that. And in case anyone thinks there's a kind of secret message here about the desirability or otherwise of legislation in the US, I need to make a couple of disclaimers. It's already an offence for a firm to lose customer data in the UK. Regulators of critical national infrastructure in the UK already have powers to look at cybersecurity of firms in their sectors as part of their general duties on maintaining resilience and security of supply. And our different legal context means that we haven't needed new powers to permit information sharing between government and the private sector. If we had needed those powers, I guess we would have taken them. So what are we doing? Well, we're operating on the following themes. We are building up the UK's national sovereign capability to detect and defeat the high-end threats. We are working with the companies that own and manage our critical national infrastructure to make sure that they're properly protected. We are working with businesses to make sure they understand the risks and are doing what they can to protect themselves. We're working with people, the consumers, the ordinary public, to make sure that they know what they can do to protect themselves and to stimulate demand for better security in products and services. We're working on skills and research to make sure we've got the people and the top-end research to keep pace with this problem into the medium term. And of course, we're working with international partners to bear down on what will otherwise be havens for cybercrime, to build capacity, and to establish norms of behavior in what at the moment feels like a pretty ungoverned space. So what are we doing against each one of those? I won't say much about the international one, not because it's not interesting or vital, but because on that our policy is very similar to the US's. If you know what the US is doing, you know what we're also trying to do. I'll concentrate on notes from a small island far away. So what are we doing on the CNI stuff? Well, one interesting development there has been the building of a cyber information sharing partnership involving nearly all of the firms in our critical national infrastructure. You have the ISACs in the US, but they are very sector focused. Our feedback from our industry was that they didn't want to talk to no-hopers in their own sector. They wanted to talk to people in other sectors who had skills, techniques, information that they could benefit from. So our information sharing partnership is a broader thing than the ISACs. It's about people from different sectors sharing information with one another and with the government, enabled by a fusion cell of secondees from industry, people from the intelligence agencies, people from law enforcement, bringing all of that together and spotting trends. As I say, we've got nearly all of the firms in our CNI in it already. Firms are joining at sort of rates of 20 a week. We're very pleased with it, and we think it gives us a real platform for that real-time sharing of information, which is so crucial to all of this. We can tell some excellent war stories already of information culled from the banks, which the pharma sector, for example, has used to protect itself, because you can be sure that the threat that begins in one place is coming for you next. I mentioned reaching out to business. A lot has gone on in the UK to raise awareness of this topic, and that's having some success. There aren't many of our largest companies that have not now had a discussion at board level of what they're doing about cyber risks. But the priority, and I mean, as one initiative I might mention on that is something we've done with the big audit houses in the UK to make sure to do a survey of all of our biggest companies and then a follow-up visit from their lead auditor looking at cyber risk as part of the annual audit of the company. But I don't myself think that this outreach, this awareness raising is enough by itself. I think that unless people feel that you can make money by being good at this, they're not going to invest to the right level. So the priority in this area for us is those market mechanisms, the things that make it easier for people to make this a differentiator for them in the marketplace, and which give investors, insurers, auditors, people who are interested in this but don't know a lot about it, something to bite on when they consider how companies are performing. Crucial there has been the development of a standard, a badge that a company can wear that says, do your law business with me, I won't lose your stuff. Not like him, he doesn't have the badge. That's in preparation now and will be ready by the end of March for companies to start auditing themselves against it. We hope that will begin to unlock some of that market mechanism I talked about. Public awareness, we've run large campaigns. Those have had some success. They're difficult to do because you don't want to put people off the internet or give them the impression that it's a dark and dangerous place. They're also difficult because such campaigns can only carry a certain amount of freight in terms of messages. If they're too long or complicated, people just switch off, as Michael Daniels said earlier. But we're having some success. The most recent round reached 4 million people in the UK. In surveys afterwards, 2/3 of them said they would change their behavior as a consequence. So we're going to be doing more of that. I mentioned skills and research. This is obviously absolutely crucial. We have set up 11 academic centres of excellence in the UK. We've funded 2 research institutes. There's a new one coming on industrial control systems, which we regard as a key priority. We've also done a lot to try and build the cadre of people in the UK who understand these topics and can be the cyber ninjas of the future. We have changed the curriculum in schools so as to cover this. We have changed the required syllabus for software engineering degrees so that from 2015 you will not be able to get a degree in software engineering in the UK unless you've done a module on security. At the moment you can pass out of university with a degree in that subject, not having done a single second of this stuff. We've invested in PhDs, we bought 100 more of those. All these initiatives are important, but they're quite long-term. The first of these PhDs, for example, will not be awarded until 2017. Apparently you have to study for them. So the priority in this area is the faster burn stuff, the quicker things that get people transferring, for example, out of other IT jobs into this area faster, apprenticeships, MAs, professional formation routes. That's what we're really working on now. Finally, and skipping back to the national sovereign capability, obviously a lot of that investment goes into our Signals Intelligence Agency, GCHQ. I can't tell you what they do with it, but just to say that that investment in understanding the threat and where it's going next is absolutely essential to everything else we're doing. That is what gives us the understanding we need to tell businesses what they need to do. That's what helps us prioritize our defensive efforts. Without that, the rest of this just wouldn't really work. We're also, though, investing in law enforcement so they can keep pace with the increasing volume and sophistication of cybercrime. We have tripled the numbers of specialist policemen and prosecutors in this area. We brought them together into a new national cybercrime unit, which is already having some success. The priority there is to make sure that this new organisation is greater than the sum of the preceding parts, and that it really cracks on with not just convictions, important though those are, but the kind of disruption activities and the working with international partners, which is clearly crucial to success. So there's a brief kind of whirlwind tour of what we're up to in the UK. We will refresh our cyber strategy in 2015 when the government looks again at a broader national security strategy. Who knows what will happen then, but I'll be very surprised if this topic drops in salience. Thank you very much for listening.
That was great. Thank you so much, James. There's certainly many initiatives that are underway, and I still think the United States has much to learn from the United Kingdom, especially on information sharing and your laws that have been far more effective than ours. Mihali's going to talk about the initiatives that are underway in Hungary. He's the president of the National Security Authority, and as such, he's the lead for cyber in Hungary. So I look forward to hearing from you.
The title of the conference is, at least of this panel, is Are We Making Progress? So I think we are making a progress, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. And everybody is dealing with this question, so we are talking about it, we work on it, so I think in the last years, the recent years, everybody learned and had to learn that we have to do something with the cyber questions. I'm coming from a small European country, which is neighboring with Ukraine. I heard about Ukraine some words in the morning. We have also difficulties from this question. Also in cyber questions, we also have our gas and oil pipelines in a very huge percentage through Ukraine from Russia. We have a Hungarian minority in Ukraine, so we have many difficulties. We are also suffering from different cybercrime attacks. We are suffering from different cyber espionage cases. We are also working on those espionage cases. We are also working on malwares. We have, as you may know, the Hungarian Crisis Lab on the Hungarian Technical University, which was dealing with Stuxnet, Duku, Gauss, and all the other reverse engineering questions. And according to the Microsoft survey, last quarter of 2012, that time Hungary was the third most infected, cyber-infected country in Europe, and somewhere fifth or sixth in the world. Since then, the situation is a bit better. But we started to work on this question about 3 years ago. So, and we were also part, and maybe it's a very interesting situation with the Korean and the British colleague, that we have the cyberspace conference, which is I think the biggest initiative in this cyber question. So some words about the Hungarian NSA. The Hungarian National Security Authority was established many years ago, originally for the protection of the classified data. And we started to work on cyber questions in 2010, end of 2010. And from 2011, our Cyber Defense Management Authority inside the NSA was established. And since then, we work with this question. Yeah. So, from 2010, 2011, we had, as many others, always more and more heavy attacks, not only by hacktivists, but also in espionage field. And our national defense strategy was, according to that, changed in 2012. And in that national defense strategy, also the need for the cyber defense and the need for the regular survey in this field was written. Then we also started to work on a new legal background. The new legal background, on the new legal background, we were working about 2 years. Of course, in this field, we have many stakeholders. It's maybe the biggest investment in every government in the world when we spend on those IT things. And in 2013, we achieved that with the leading role of the Prime Minister's office to convince all the stakeholders in this field not to be against each other. So we achieved that a new cyber defense strategy was accepted. It was last year in March. And it's also very important that all those things we were wondering are important were written into this cyber defense strategy. The most important, what we do think, is the prevention. So everybody has computer emergency response teams. But according to many stakeholders' interests and according to this prevention role, you will see we have a very, not very complex, but a complex cyber defense background. What are the main laws and acts which are important from this point of view? You see on the left, it's the protection, about the protection of classified data. In Hungary, and I think also in other countries, there are debates who has to be responsible for the cyber defense question. And there is the obvious decision in Hungary that we didn't want to have two different authorities, one for unclassified networks and one for classified, and nevertheless we do not see slowly too much difference between those or among those networks as well. And then we have also a new law on cyber defense, which was made last April and entered into force last 1st of July, which says all those roles and institutions who are responsible in this field. And we also have a law on the protection of critical infrastructure, which also deals with cyber defense questions, and which also says that those institutions are responsible for critical infrastructure protection in the cyber field, which are also named in the cyber defense law. And this slide is the most important. That's why I decided to have a slideshow. And this is also the last page. This is our system. First of all, we had to establish, and we were happy to establish, a political connection, where a cyber coordination council was established, which is led by a state secretary appointed by the Prime Minister. The most important is, I don't know, at least in Hungary, it's the situation that most of the politicians are not very well trained or educated in digital things. I think politicians normally will be politicians not because of IT knowledge, there is something different. And therefore, we always had, and all the people who are working in the IT field or cyber defense field, all of them know that it's very hard to convince politicians to get money, to make policies, to make decisions. So this coordination council is for this reason established. All those stakeholders are represented in this coordination council, which have to do something with the cyber defense, and we can transmit all the problems to the political level, and the politicians are obliged to deal with this problem. The next three columns are about the system, the working system. The first one is the work which is made by the National Security Authority of Hungary. This is the preventive work. It's very simple. There is nothing new under the sun. It means that we are checking the systems regularly for vulnerabilities, and we try to let fix those problems by the different institutions. And of course, we make work in the forensic field and log management, incident management, and we also make security awareness trainings. The next column is about this is about the supervising the IT systems. There is an authority which is an auditing authority, and according to law, it's mandatory to rank all the institutions from IT perspective from 1 to 5. And for each ranking level, there are certain human and technical capabilities which they have to fulfill. And the auditing authority has the right to change the ranking anytime, and they can send also commissioners to the different governmental or critical infrastructure institutions who are not very well in the cyber defense field. And last but not least, we have the CERT system. This is a new one. We had also computer emergency response teams also before that, but we didn't have the government CERT till last 1st of July, when this GovCERT was established. It plays a certain umbrella role and helps the other CERTs. And of course, we have critical infrastructure CERT, and we have military CERT, and we have many, many sectoral CERTs. And last, what I forget from this slide, but it's very important, it's the training and education. We have a governmental university for police, military, and public administration purposes, and they make the basic trainings. We have, I forgot to tell it, we have many different executive governmental decrees. And according to one of the governmental decrees, this governmental university is responsible for to make trainings for the information security officers and system administrators. So it's a basic level. And we also established with the University of Pannonia in Veszprém, 100 kilometers from Budapest, Research and Development Center, where we make also elite trainings, not only for experts or different interested cyber defense colleagues, but we make also trainings for software and hardware developers. So this is our system. If you have any questions, then I will be very happy to answer it. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. That was great. It was a wonderful panel and background. We have about 30 minutes, so I'm going to ask maybe the first one or two questions, and I'd like the audience to start thinking about what questions they might have for the panel. As you're thinking about those, I'd like you to queue up behind the microphone and then announce who you are and where you're from and as you ask the question. As we heard each of these different strategies and approaches among the different countries, I'm struck by the fact that some are thinking about a more holistic threat and others are thinking about more focused. And as I've been looking at cybersecurity and the different countries' approaches, I think that we are defining cybersecurity in at least 6 different buckets. The first is those and countries that are really worried about political activism. And while we have two pretty famous political activists in the United States, Bradley, now Chelsea Manning, and Edward Snowden, but there are others who are using the internet and internet-based technologies to assemble in the streets of Cairo or Taksim Square or even in Ukraine to protest against their governments. And some countries' strategies are actually focused on that type of political activism and the mechanisms one would need to put in place around the internet and surveillance and technologies. Other countries are focused on the high activity among criminals, whether that is the actual heist of personal identifiable data, like we just saw here in the United States with the Target breach of stealing our credit card data, and et cetera, affecting 1/3 of the US population. But when I was in Europe just last spring in the Czech Republic and elsewhere, we saw a pretty sophisticated ATM heist where criminals were actually able to steal our bank accounts, maximize our limits, and take anywhere from $30 to $45 million of real money out of ATM machines in less than an hour. And organized crime is alive and well, and many of our countries are focused their cybersecurity strategies against the crime efforts. There are others of our countries, including the United States, that are focusing more on intellectual property theft, where we have criminals and nation states breaking into our companies and illegally copying the information of the plans, proposals, formulas, technologies, and exporting them into other places to advance their economic well-being. There's much discussion about espionage, but as many countries conduct espionage, very few countries are going to not conduct espionage. But it's a fourth area, and many times our countries are confounding the intellectual property theft and bundling it with espionage. And I think that that is a place or a course and path that will not reach success in negotiations with other countries of limiting espionage, while we are willing to limit intellectual property theft. The last two areas that certainly affected Korea most recently and Saudi Arabia were, the first is the disruption of service. The disruption of service against the Shanghai Bank and against the United States banks and against the critical services upon which we depend upon are becoming at a scale that are not just a nuisance, that are going to affect our economic well-being and our ability to deliver citizen services. And our countries are not focused enough, I don't think, on the disruption of service and how we're going to have assured communications, assured essential services delivered over and through the internet, through these pretty weak and vulnerable information communications technologies. And how are we going to make them more secure and resilient? And what is that path? And then finally, the destruction of property, of which Nino talked a little bit about, of how do we get to confidence building measures. But we saw an actual military-grade weapon released against the Saudi Aramco institution a little more than a year ago. That was a beginning of a real corporate conversation about how are we going to protect our infrastructures. As you know, the Saudi Aramco represents more than 10% of the world's oil supply. And while that virus destroyed 70% of their IT assets, yes, 70% of their IT assets in their back office, it was truly intended for the oil production. Can you imagine what the cost of oil or gas would be today if you took 10% of the world's supply offline for a day, a week, a month, or longer? It would be an economic crisis that would pale to what we've been seeing around the world today based on the financial institutions. So with that as a backdrop, if I could ask the panel in no particular order, or whoever would like to speak first, on some of the priorities of the threat in your country, and which is the one that's keeping your leaders up at night, and then how do you expand the thinking around cybersecurity to all 6 activities, not just a few of them? Thank you.
Okay. Let me pause. Thank you for your question. Among those 6 activities in Korea right now, of course, some kind of the military or defense perspective kind of approach is very critical because of nowadays, as you know, there are many in Korean peninsula, actually, those Korea and those kind of the hostile groups, they are taking, those kind of cyber, efforts to get something, to make something. Actually, as Japanese colleagues said, actually, 2009, DDoS attack was happened, actually, based on our investigation. The log file is from China, but actually the real owner is from actually North Korea. Those kind of things are ongoing every day. So we need to deal with these things in terms of the national defense perspective. And actually another one is kind of daily-based business. In January, as I said, those kind of huge amount of personal information, name, phone number, bank account, those kind of information was leaked. Total number is 100 million. It's all of the Korean people, their information is leaked. So nowadays, those kind of spamming, smishing, those kind of is happening. So we need to protect those kind of attack from those kind of incidents. And we need to deal with effectively when those kind of event is possibly every day actually is happening. We have to deal with this event more effectively and more promptly. So those kind of efforts, I think, is kind of very high priority area. And of course, there are national critical information infrastructure issue, many other issues. I think those areas are very critical right now. Thank you.
Okay. First question, right? Well, of course, first of all, we are sort of really focusing on the critical infrastructure because there are so many industries also working on it, and we set up the test bed so that we can do R&D and so many human resource trainings and that kind of thing, and. Also, such as the critical industry information, which is our source of global competitiveness, and corporations, academia, and R&D institutes which deal with intellectual property and privacy information. They need to strengthen, to recognize, and to respond to the incidents of cyber attacks. But among other things that maybe I should touch upon at the last thing, but let me tell you the things. There are 2 urgent matters to work on Japan right now. First of all is imperative security clearance, because the Japanese government does not collect enough information on cyber attack, since there is no information sharing system based on trust as UK has. Japanese corporations are rather reluctant to report to the government. They're concerned if they do so, politicians and bureaucrats will leak information to mass media, so there is no any for their own good reporting to the government. So the discussion is critical regarding cyber attack and secrecy law. So we need to define which information should be confidential for the government and who can access to the confidential information beforehand. And also we need to adjust new law to deal with the current and future cyber attacks. Otherwise, we would never specify who has stolen and what has been stolen, even if it is highly probable that national confidential information. So I think that's all about it.
Thank you.
So, Melissa, we're in the UK working on all the 6 buckets that you mentioned, with the possible exception of the first one. We are very interested in preventing leaks of government information that would be damaging to national security. I think that's a better description of the cases you mentioned. We're not so interested in suppressing political activism. Rather the contrary. The UK wants to tackle the risks, but in a way which protects the thing that we're trying to protect, which is an open internet, free for the free flow of information, ideas, and trade. We want to keep this thing open rather than trying to tackle the risks by locking it up or carving it up.
In Hungary, I think it differs also on the size of the country and the political role. So we have, of course, hacktivists, and we have a disruption of service, especially in the governmental sphere, where normally websites will be stopped. I think it's not the biggest harm at all, and we have a luck that the hacktivists are not so too much active. If we are talking about critical infrastructure, then we know, all of us, that the SCADA networks they have the same problem everywhere in the world. They are all full of Stuxnet, Duku, and all the other problems. But among the biggest problem in Hungary, I think, is the espionage, where the cyber espionage, we know exactly, if you remember from the Red October through the Miniduke to Team Spy and all the other cases, they were all active in our region, and most of them were coming from eastwards. And I think it's the situation of the country where we will be attacked as a smaller country, and they try to make zombies from Hungarian networks attacking allies. So this is the biggest problem, and this is why we are focusing also our NSA on malware analysis. And we also try to share information in this field with our partners.
I think Mihaly touched upon a really important thing here. Different things, different threats keep up political decision makers in different countries. So if I look at the 57 OSCE participating states, it's not like I could identify one issue that really would apply to all 57 of them, but if I had to pick the one that probably comes up most often in discussions, certainly that has come up most often in discussions at the OSCE, it's been the danger of an escalation of a cyber ICT attack into a real-world potentially kinetic attack. This is definitely something that has in many ways guided what we have been doing in this thematic area, and the work on the confidence building measures has been a direct response to this particular concern. I mean, closely linked to this is the question of how you protect your national critical infrastructure. But if I, again, had to pick one, it would be this escalation of a cyber attack into a real world attack.
Thank you. I'm going to open up the floor to the questions. First person.
I'm Mark Seiden. I'm a consultant. A lot of the causes of DDoS attacks on infrastructure are a consequence of failure to filter IP addresses at the edge. The recommendation to do that, called BCP 38, is about 15 years old. And a lot of the malware problems are not really addressed by ISPs because the regulatory environment in many countries doesn't require them to do that. Are any of you people considering changing your regulatory environment to require ISPs to be responsible for network hygiene and to enforce good practices or better practices to reduce the threat level?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the United States Federal Communications Commission through their cybersecurity working group began a voluntary code of conduct to have the internet service providers start to deal with the infections that exist on the United States infrastructure. No matter what vendor you look at and what statistics you use, the United States is the most infected infrastructure globally, and we have the most command and control nodes operating botnets globally. So we are harboring a lot of the activity that's causing criminal activity around the world. Our regulators have chosen not to regulate yet, but to use it as a voluntary program. But as you know, there's a new chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, and he's considering taking it further because it is our responsibility to not harbor crime and illegal activities in the United States. Our program was modeled after what the Australians did, and actually what the OECD propagated around for the economic global leaders. But I'll leave it to the other panelists to discuss their countries or the OECD's initiatives.
In Korea, recently we have tried to introduce new CIIP protection system. So right now, actually, 207 systems are included, and we're going to expand actually to more than 47 the systems going to be included as CIIP. And regarding the regulation, telecommunication, energy, and banking, those systems need to be protected from those kind of malicious traffic. So we picked some private business companies to provide some more consulting service to protect from those kind of outside attacks to those the systems. So this kind of the consulting service should be included among the regulatory kind of the framework. So we recommended, my ministry recommended to those authorities, for instance, telecommunication authority, energy authority, or any other, the water energy authority, banking authority as well. So we recommended they're gonna change those kind of the monitoring system, whether they're gonna be attacked from other outside kind of the people or entities. So we are trying to change the regulatory the scheme to protect more strongly.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, so in Hungary the situation is very simple. So we do not have Hungarian ISPs. So this means that our influence is unfortunately not so good as it could be. But if we see all the other institutions, then on the governmental level and on the contractors level, of course, it's obligatory to achieve a certain hygiene of the networks. And as I mentioned on the last slide, so we have those rankings, and for the according to the rankings, there are different requirements which have to be fulfilled. And of course, the head of the institution, according to this new law, the head of the institution is responsible for that defense or for that kind of security. If not, then he can also face some penal problems.
From my perspective, again, looking at a large group of states, I can assure you that the question of cyber hygiene is something that they're all worried about. The problem is they're worried about it to varying degrees, and there is not exactly like one approach that really a harmonized approach that they have all taken. My gut feeling would be that this would be a fantastic area for there to be a harmonized approach, but I think we are still quite a way away from it.
To your point about raising the cyber threat to a kinetic attack, the consequence of poor hygiene is that the attribution of the attack is very difficult to do, if not impossible. So, and there's no one to go to say, this is coming from your IP space, clean it up, and then they push down, the regulator can push down on the internet service provider and say, this is coming from your network, clean it up. There's just no place to push at the moment because of the lack of regulation internationally. So,
hi, Mike Best again. Setting aside for the moment cyber attacks against nation states and critical infrastructure like the electrical grid, intellectual property theft has been mentioned several times by both as being committed by both corporations and nation states, which then pass it on to companies in their jurisdiction. With the international perspective we have here, I'm curious what you all think about the viability of financial retaliation, I suppose, against corporations which have been identified as committing cyber attacks for the purposes of sabotaging their competition or stealing intellectual property or knowingly benefit from it, and whether or not it would be more effective to simply levy fines, tariffs, or actual trade restrictions to discourage individual corporations from doing that.
Thank you for your question. Would anybody like to? There are certainly many, I'll take the question and then we'll go to the next one. There are certainly many market levers that could be used once a corporation has been identified as participating in illegal activity. If they do work for the government, they could be disbarred. There's certainly fines that can be levied here in the United States. And then there are proven court cases where companies have brought other companies to court to settle disputes on illegal theft or illegally copying of their core trade secrets. And then they have paid fines and they've lost market share. And then it comes to a question of brand and reputation of those companies that participate in illegal activities and those who participate in the global marketplace fairly. Thank you for your question.
Tanasep from the Embassy of Estonia. I have a bit more forward-looking question. As we talk here about also the cybersecurity being kind of safeguarding the ecosystem for the business and the markets, and more and more we actually also see both businesses and why not in the future also governments using services through cloud and cloud systems. So what is your idea how, if and how, and cloud issues can be tackled also in the national cybersecurity strategies?
Okay.
Very much for your question. Well, cloud computing. Well, actually, we are focusing more on big data now. That's the reality in Japan right now. And of course, the Japanese industries, they're pursuing big data for, making profit. And actually, IBM held a conference last May in Tokyo. And for the first time, 5,000 Japanese corporation executives got together to hear, how can, they get involved in big data. But also, big data is also the, privacy, personal information might be leaked out. And also, it has a huge potential for the economy. So we need to, now that the Japanese government and the industries, we are now discussing, how to balance, the potential risks and the potential benefit. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
So this is of big interest to us in the UK. In principle, I see no reason why the move to the cloud shouldn't be positive from a cybersecurity perspective. Instead of important IP and trade secrets kind of lying around in cubby holes all over companies with a man and a dog to protect them, there'll be somewhere where it is, someone's business to make sure that they're looked after. Similarly, even the thickest of company boards knows that at the point at which you kind of outsource all of your vital IP, you're supposed to ask some questions about how that's going to be looked after. So the demand for better security is potentially there. In the UK, we're working to make sure that we kind of capitalize on this and that we put guidance into the hands of company boards at that point, so they don't just ask the questions, they also understand the answers and drive the right deals for security when they make this move.
Yeah, very briefly, Estonia has been one of the most active countries in the OSCE when it comes to cybersecurity, so I'm not going to miss responding to your question. In general, the question of the cloud, when we're looking at cyber strategies up to now, or the ones that were looked at in the past, has not been obviously a key component thereof. But I think in all the discussions that I've had, there has been a recognition that this is going to be something that all states really need to pay a whole lot of attention to as we move forward. And in this regard, one of the key themes that kept coming up was the question of public-private partnerships. I think states have understood that this particularly is an area that they cannot go alone, that they really do need help effectively from the private sector to do this in a good way. So I do think that looking ahead, this really will be one of the key components that all states will have to look at.
I'm just going to echo that as it's becoming a key issue with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and the EU-US Free Trade Agreement, among others, because each of our countries are handling the privacy and protection of data very differently, and so it will require harmonization of data in order to truly, and the protection of data in order to see the benefits of it and to address it through our national security. We are at 10:40. Thank you for your question, and I want to keep things moving. I would like to thank my panel. You've come from very far away into what I consider bad weather. You might not see it that way, and I'm ready for spring, and thank you so much for giving us your time this morning.